has been a right triangle, and 8-5 and 8-6 are not, okay? So they're gonna look a little bit different. I think 8-5 is pretty simple for most people. 8-6 can be a little trickier, but as long as you know the formula for 8-5, it's pretty simple how you set it up. It's proportions, okay? And you guys have done a lot with proportions. All of chapter 7 was proportions, right? So hopefully this clicks for you. If it doesn't, make sure you ask. I'm happy to try to make it click. All right, here we go. So the law of sines is what it's called, which should make you think, what trig function are we using all day today? Sine, okay? Don't plug in cosine, don't plug in tangent. It will only be sine with what we're doing today. The law of sine says this: for any triangle ABC, we're going to let the lengths of the sides and angles be what you see right here. So capitals for the angles, lowercases for the sides. And what you do is, it says then the law of sines relates the sine of each angle to the length across from it, okay? So in other words, here's what we're saying. If I take the sine of angle A, I'm going to put it over the side that's across from it. Which side is across from angle A? A. So from A to A, right? So this is what we're saying. The sine of A over A will equal the sine of B over what? B, the side across from it, which will also equal the sine of C over the side across from it. Okay, so there's this extended proportion here. Now, I don't typically write that extended proportion when I give you a formula on the quiz, let's say. If I say, here's the law of sines, here's the law of cosines, here's what we know, I will give it to you like this because you don't ever solve it like that. But it is true. Every side and angle has this relationship, okay? But I will give you this as the formula. So on the 8-5 quiz, I give you the formula. Sometimes I even give it on the test. There's a good chance you'll get the formula on the test, but you need to know how to apply it, okay? And it's pretty simple to apply, if you ask me. So here it is. When to use the law of sines. Law of sines shows up really in 3 different scenarios, and simply put, these are them. Okay? When you see that set up in a triangle, you can do the law of sines. So basically, use the law of sines when you know 2 angles and the length of a side. So that could be AAS, or that could be ASA. Or when you know 2 side lengths and the non-included obtuse angle. So basically, it's going to be the donkey in donkey form, right? It's going to be SSA or ASS. If you see that setup, you can use the law of sines. Now, I don't spend any time trying to remember that. If you want to, that's great. You can say, okay, I got to remember it's AAS, ASA, and SSA. Sure. Here's what I do. I look at a triangle, and I just ask myself, do I have an angle with the side across from it and an angle with the side across from it? So if you look here, I have an angle. I'm looking for the side across from it. And I have an angle, and I have the side across from it. If I have angle, side, right, just like that, I can do the law of sines.
So you only need 2? You don't need the measurement from across and
No, yep, that's why I said I'll always just give you this, because you'll never do it using all 3 of them. You'll just use 2 setups. So we can set up a proportion to solve. Okay, so considering that, here's your setup then. We would say the sine of 125 over what? X, the side across from it, should equal what? The sine of 28 over the side across from it, which is 11.4. Okay? Questions on how I got the setup? Does that make sense? Okay, so what you're gonna do from here, you know how to do. What do you do to solve a proportion? You're gonna cross multiply. You do have to be a little bit careful with how you're plugging things into your calculator because parentheses will start. Don't do it. So you need to just be careful with parentheses, okay? So if we cross multiply this, here's what I would do. I would do 11.4 out in front because of what Annika was just asking about, right? Could you put it at the back? Yes. But if you don't put the parenthesis in, you will get the wrong answer. So just put it at the front so that it doesn't matter, okay? So we're gonna say 11.4 times the sine of 125 equals, okay, and now go this way, x times sine 28. Okay, now it's up to you. If you don't want to mess with parenthesis issues, you could right now plug in this whole side and get a number and then divide by sine 28 after that. I don't ever do that just because I think it's quicker just to plug it in one shot. So your next step then would be this. If you divide by sine 28 over here, then you need to divide by sine 28 over here. Okay, now I need every single one of you to have your calculator in front of you and plug this in with me so that you make sure you're plugging it in the right way. Okay, you're gonna plug in 11.4 sine, and then your calculator is gonna start this one. You must end it. Okay, if you don't end your 125 here and then you divide, your calculator thinks you're taking the sine of 125 divided by sine 28, which we're not. We're taking the sine of 125 times 11.4 and then dividing by sine 28, okay? Your other option, if you don't want to finish off that parenthesis, is to hit enter right here, okay? Here's what I would do. I would do 11.4 sine 125 parenthesis. So it should look exactly like this right now. Then hit your divided by key and then sine 28. What did you get? 19.8911, right? So we would say x is approximately, we'll go nearest tenth, 19.9. Did anyone not get 19.9 and not know why? Okay, so your other option, if you don't want to plug it all in as one big thing, then just do 11.4 times sine 125, enter, and that'll give you some funky decimal. Then go divided by sine 28, enter, and you should get the exact same thing we did. Okay? Questions on that? Okay. Example 2 is similar. Does anyone see the difference in these? What's the difference from example 1 to example 2? You're finding an angle measure. What do you always use when you find an angle measure? The inverse, okay? So you will use the inverse of sine at times, and sometimes you'll use just sine, but make sure you know which is which, all right? So if you're solving for an angle, maybe you just want to make a little note in your notes here, right? If you solve for an angle, you're going to use the inverse, okay? Okay, so look at your triangle right now and ask yourself, can you even use the law of sines on this? So remember, law of sines says you go from an angle to the side across from it, and then from an angle to the side across from it. Do you have all but one of those numbers? Yes, that's when you know you can do it, okay? Because we have the unknown, so we're going to solve for that unknown, but we're going to set this up. Okay, so this is going to be the sine. I'm going purple here. Sine of what? I'm doing the purple one, but yes, you could do sine of x right now. Sine of 43 over what? 9. Good. Equals, what would the blue be? The sine of x over 13. Okay? So that's your proportion. Now we're going to cross multiply it. And when you do that, like I said, I would put the 13 out in front of sine 43. Okay, otherwise you have to finish off your parenthesis and it just gets done wrong a lot. So 13 times the sine of 43, all right, that's your first diagonal. Then do the other one, cross multiply here. That's 9 times the sine of x. What would you do next? Divide by 9, right? We can't divide by 9 sine because this is a number. The sine of x is a number, okay? But we can divide by 9 and divide by 9. Okay, so let's see if you can plug that into your calculator correctly. 13 sine 43 divided by 9. What did you get? Yeah, 0.98510, right? That should be your number. If you didn't get that, my guess is it's because you didn't finish off your parenthesis right here. Your calculator is going to start it. You have to finish it, okay? So 13 sine parenthesis 43, end your parenthesis, then divide by 9, okay? Okay, so then what we have is this all came out to 0.9851, some big number, okay? You don't even have to write that down if you don't want. I'm going to show you how to plug this really nicely into your calculator. As long as on your calculator screen right now, your entered thing is that 0.985, okay? Here's what you do. Go second sine, okay? And now just hit the second button. And then down at the bottom, it says ANS. Do you see that ANS? Mine's above the negative. Is yours above the negative? Yeah. Okay, so hit your negative button. And all that does is it takes the inverse sign of the last thing that was on your screen. That answer, you may use that all the time. It's so helpful. Second sign, second negative, enter, and what do you get? 80.1. So this one said round to the nearest tenth. So this is going to be, so here's what you're plugging in, sorry. Inverse sign of that number, 0.9851, so on and so forth. That comes out to 80.1 degrees. Okay, so if you are solving for an angle, you have to use that button, the negative, inverse sine, okay? Are you ever going to use cosine or tangent today? No. Not on these types of problems, right? Yeah.
Do we have to round to the nearest degree?
These ones said nearest tenth. Typically with degrees, it's nearest degree, but there are a couple, like these ones, they often ask you for nearest tenth. So just pay attention to where it's asking you to round and round there. Yeah. Okay, last one. Here it is. It says a ship has been at sea longer than expected and has only enough fuel to safely sail another 42 miles. Port City Lighthouse and Cove Town Lighthouse are located 40 miles apart along the coast. At sea, the captain cannot determine distance by observation. The triangle formed by the lighthouses and the ship is shown. Can the ship sail safely to either lighthouse? Okay, so you have your ship right there, and you have your two lighthouses. Basically, what we're trying to figure out is this going to be, not 40, sorry, safely another 42 miles. So is that going to be 42 miles or less? Or is this going to be 42 miles or less? Or are they both going to be 42 miles or less? So really, we're trying to find two sides here. Okay, so I'm going to call this one X, and I'm going to call this one Y, and we're going to check them both. Now, that would make it seem like we don't have enough information right now, right? Do you see a piece of information that we know but isn't written in? Yeah.
Third angle.
The third angle. We can find that third angle because it's got to add up to 180. So 52 and 70, and we'll call this Z, have to equal 180. So if we take that away, that third angle, what is it? 58. That third angle is going to be 58 degrees. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the law of sines twice. We're gonna solve for x and we're gonna solve for y, and we're gonna see what works, okay? So let's start with x. Can anyone give me the setup if we're solving for x?
So this is sine x divided by 52.
No. What always comes after a trig function? Sine of an angle, right? It's always sine of the angle. So you need to do sine 52 over what? Yeah, across from x, right? So sine 52 over x. Okay, now the other one that we can do right now is which one?
Sine 58 over 40.
Right, we have to do the 58 because the 70 doesn't have a side across from it that we know the length of yet, okay? So then we're gonna go sine 58 over 40. Okay. So that's your setup for it. Remember, a side or angle with the side across from it, angle with the side across from it. Yeah.
We did x because we don't know what x is either.
I'm just solving for x first. You could have started with y, but then you wouldn't do the x at all, right? So pick either one to do first, but you have to use the 58 and the 40. Okay, so here's your setup. How do you solve this? Cross multiply it. Okay, so if I go here, this is 40 sine 52. Go here, that's x sine 58. How do you solve that?
Divide by sine 58.
Divide by sine 58 to get rid of it over here. Divide by sine 58. What do you have to be careful of? Parentheses. Make sure this parenthesis gets put in, right? 40 sine 52 parenthesis divided by sine 58. Plug that in right now and tell me what you get. 37 point, what'd you say? 16. So 37.2, we'll say. So 37.2, we're talking miles. Okay, so that's this length, 37.2 miles. So can the ship make it to Port City Lighthouse? Yeah. They can. Yep, so this is a yes. Okay, let's see if they can make it to Covetown Lighthouse. How will you set it up for Covetown? I'm going to go over on the left for this so we don't get it all mixed up. Yep, sine 70 over y equals the same one as before, sine 58 over 40. Okay, so now we cross multiply that. This is 40 sine 70. Remember, sine 70 is a number, so treat it like a number. Keep it together, sine 70, okay? Put the 40 out in front of that. Equals y sine 58, okay? And then from here, we want to isolate the y, so divide by sine 58 and divide by sine 58. So this is gone. Don't forget your parenthesis right here. Plug that in. 40 sine 70 divided by sine 58. And y comes out to what? 44.3 miles. Okay. So can he make it to the Covetown Lighthouse? No, he can't. It was 42 miles that he can go, right? That's 44, so he would not make that. Questions on that?